In this module, we would be studying about the political environment of business. After studying this module, you shall be able to understand the concept of political environment, identify the critical elements of political environment, assess the impact of different political factors on business. The political environment consists of a set of political factors and the government activities that can either facilitate or hinder business activity. It is one of the less predictable elements of the business environment. It includes the state, the government and its institutions, legislations and the public and private stakeholders who operate and interact with each other and influence the environment of the country, which all put together is known as the political environment. The political atmosphere should be good, it should be stable and it should benefit the firms so that they could operate in a better environment and they could be more profitable, more successful and could lead to greater economic growth in the country. What are the critical factors in the political environment? The following factors which play a crucial role in determining the political environment of business are: 1. The government ideology, the bureaucracy, the pressure groups, the corruption, the strength of the opposition and political and legal institutions. Let us first consider government ideology. Over a long time period, many political philosophers have expounded on the variety of political ideologies. In a democracy, in a country like India, the ideology of the ruling party influences the ownership, the management structure and the size of the business. The rightist ideology of the ruling party may formulate liberal policies for the business, whereas a leftist view of the ruling party would lead to socialism and such other populist policies. It would lead to also such measures like nationalization, there may be over centralization. So, the ideology or outlook of the ruling party may help or hurt the core of the business activities in a country. Earlier, the Indian government favored progressive income tax policies and opposed unregulated business and finance activities. But in recent years, they have followed a centrist economic, social and democratic agenda. But today, our ruling party focuses on neoliberal policies which include social liberalism, secularism and free enterprise system with the government regulation. Therefore, it is a neoliberal market oriented framework that the governments are encouraging, but it is not devoid of government regulation. The main shift came under the regime of Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao and the then Finance Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh. A significant economic reform was initiated and more stress was laid on efficiency rather than equity. These regimes affected the day-to-day operations of public enterprises directly and indirectly on the other private businesses as well. In 1991, the Congress with its alliance introduced what is called the new economic policy, in which they welcomed the idea of privatization, liberalization and subsequently also what we call globalization. This policy was thereafter continued even by the BJP government led by Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and in 2004 again privatization came into existence with the emergence of the Congress party, which was following a right of center approach. Although earlier it was left of center. Political parties and their ideologies in India. The Communist Party of India, Marxist CPIM, calls itself a revolutionary safeguard of the working class of India. Its political ideology is centered on socialism, communism, and the establishment of state-owned institutions. The party's activities are mainly guided by the principles of Marxism and Leninism. The declared objective of CPIM is the emancipation of the masses and finding a way to end the exploitation of man by man. The party is now more or less concentrated in a few states in the entire country. Despite falling under the communist family, the All India Forward Bloc is distinctly different from other left parties. Unlike CPI and CPM, the AIFB is a left-wing political party that does not follow Marxism and Leninism. The party is an advocator of the socialism that is identified by the thought of Subhash Chandra Bose. The Congress has been the ruling party in India for several decades, and the Congress remained the dominant party in Indian politics, and it has influenced the political environment and won several elections and has remained in power, including some coalition governments. The social liberal outlook of the Congress party is generally placed left of center, although in recent times there is a shift which makes it more right of center. It follows the Gandhian principles of upliftment of the poor sections of society. Unlike many contemporary parties, Congress supports liberal nationalism, which can be referred to more as tolerant nationalism, and particularly it looks towards equality, freedom and rights, and secularism most of all. The BJP and the right-wing politics. BJP has had a good run in the past 3 to 4 decades, and slowly it has entered into the mainstream politics, and gradually it has recognized, and it has been recognized as a national party. In recent years, it has had 2 stints as at the center by forming a government. The Bharatiya Jana Sangh was the erstwhile form of BJP, and it owes its allegiance to the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, the RSS, and certain negative thoughts have also been associated with the BJP in terms of the Ram Janmabhoomi movement and so on, which led to social unrest. Now, apart from that, the basic ideology which BJP is adhering to is known as integral humanism. It was formed by Deen Dayal Upadhyay in 1965. The party has a strong advocator in social conservatism and believes in pursuing foreign policy based on nationalist principles. Earlier, the party had played a role as a strong opposition and raised many issues like minority issues and what they called pseudo-secularism, and the question of Article 370 in the case of Kashmir. Recently, the BJP and its coalition partners have focused on neoliberal economic policy. There is certainly a shift towards economic focus, and many of the right-wing thinkers, and have come up with pro-business policies in the BJP's regime. Then there are some separatist policies like the All Parties Hurriyat Conference, which is actually having a main agenda of the right to self-determination in Jammu and Kashmir. Apart from this, there are regional formations. Had such parties like Bharti Samajwadi Party and Bahujan Samajwadi Party, and the SP, which is the Samajwadi Party, Biju Janata Dal, Janata Dal United, and RJD, and so on, Rashtriya Janata Dal, and so on. So all of these parties are mainly regional parties, but in their own sphere they do form something like a third force, and these regional parties have formed highlights different issues such as empowerment of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, regional development, anti-corruption, and so on. Now let us consider bureaucracy. Bureaucracy and excessive regulation are commonly known as red tape. It has a strong influence on the business activities in any country. Red tape includes all sorts of rules, paperwork, permits, taxes, procedures, and so on. Even though there may be a great business opportunity, many organizations keep away from such countries. That is, that FDI would not be interested in entering into a country where there is too much of bureaucracy. These countries are called business unfriendly countries. The unwanted government intervention or negative influences on business is not a factor which is liked by the foreign inflow of funds by the multinationals. The red tape or bureaucracy delays the process of setting up of business. Approvals, permissions, and limits, and certain ceilings, all of these act counter to the interests of new businesses even within the domestic economy, and also in terms of new businesses who would like to come from abroad and set up their businesses in India. The pressure groups. There are many pressure groups, and pressure groups are different from organizations because pressure groups don't actually have a formal organization. Okay, so therefore a group of people or a group of institutions may come together for a particular purpose, and their purpose is to secure their own interest, and the members of this group, they would use all kinds of measures and means to pressurize the government. So unlike the stakeholders, they do not have any interest in the organization. They may have any cause, such as it could be about, let us say, environmental issues or social issues, education, health. So there could be all kinds of pressure groups. Some of these pressure groups do actually have a very positive agenda, and they have a positive influence on the business environment. For instance, if they are talking in terms of the environment, improvement of the environment, or if they are talking in terms of unemployment, education, health, etc., this leads to a better environment in which the businesses can operate without so much of unrest and uncertainty. The types of actions undertaken by these pressure groups there are 4 types of actions or issues. One could be a single cause. The pressure group focuses on a single cause, such as environmental conservation, health issues, education and so on. They multi-cause. The focus of certain pressure groups could be wider. Okay, for example, consumer protection or trade unions or other workers' rights and workers' conditions and so on. So it could be much wider. Then there are certain protective causes. The pressure group seeks to protect the interest of their own members. For example, if we have some industry body like the Confederation of Indian Industry or FICCI, these are pressure groups which create a pressure on the government for creating a business environment which is favorable to themselves as a business, as an industrial sector. Then promotional causes. There are pressure groups which promote issues related to its members and to society in general. For example, we could speak of Rotary International, which has promoted the cause of eradication of polio. The approaches that pressure groups take could be either direct or indirect. The direct way that pressure groups influence the business organizations is through lobbying, picketing or boycotting certain products and services offered. The indirect actions could be creating publicity, circulation of petitions, awareness programs and conducting research. Sometimes the pressure groups may also lead to resort to civil disobedience. When the businesses discover that the pressure groups are interested in certain companies, they often try to negotiate with such pressure groups, and in this way the pressure groups become very influential and they are able to affect the environment in which the business operates. The influence of the pressure group depends upon the business activity, how critical it is, the relevance of the issue, the reputation of the group and the contacts of the pressure group with the media and politicians. Successful campaigns can lead to change in the legal, ethical and other such business practices. This may actually lead to an increase in business cost. It may sometimes damage the business image. It may lead also to certain positive things like changes in the products. That is, we have the prominent example of Maggi in recent times, where pressure groups have forced the Maggi's production to stop, and we hope that now it may come back with improved products which are less harmful to health or safe in terms of health and safety. And this may also lead to damage to the company in terms of sales, once again, like it has happened in terms of Maggi. But then it depends on how we look at the problem. If we look at the problem from the point of the society, such a business environment is desirable. If there is a pressure group which is able to bring about such changes, then it is desirable. It is a desirable part of the business environment. In response, the business organization might accept the arguments and then they may change their business practices, might present its own arguments and evidence to counter the publicity, or it might take legal action. But legal action very often is very prolonged and it would not really lead to much of advantages. Corruption. Corruption may be explained as the misuse of entrusted power for personal gain. Corruption inevitably leads to a diminished and vitiated business environment. The public trust is compromised and this leads to a risk for the businesses. Corruption can take many forms, including graft, bribery, embezzlement, extortion and so on. Its existence reduces the credibility of business and would indirectly affect profits when professionals misuse their power and authority. Now, inefficiency could also lead to a peculiar situation as far as the business environment is concerned. If there is inefficiency, then the resources would not be properly utilized. The economic calculations of business are adversely affected, and corruption is also maybe one of the reasons for inefficiency. So therefore, inefficiency, corruption, and then we could also have another situation where there is a loss of resources. In addition to inefficiency, corruption can also lead to a number of other economic impacts on business. Employee ranks are often inflated to cover up the corruption of professional activities. The cost of increasing employee ranks, in addition to any embezzlement that is going on, is passed on to the consumer, and in the form of higher prices. Higher prices would lead to inflation, and when inflation takes place outside the company, in the form of government officials who take bribes, then indirectly the businesses are also affected, and sometimes their reputation is also affected. Consumers have to pay more in terms of the prices, and therefore this is harmful even to the consumers. There is weekend development. That means that if there is corruption, then in the developmental activities such as building of bridges, roads, etc., then what would happen is that this infrastructure would require, often it would require repairs, and this would lead to inefficiency, it would lead to delay. So another impact of corruption is a weakened development process. Competition is also sometimes becomes unfair when corrupt practices favor certain companies. And apart from this, corruption also leads to economic crimes because there is unearned income, and this unearned income has to be spent somewhere, so it is spent on all kinds of activities. Now, apart from this, we have another factor in the business environment, that is the strength of the opposition. In a democracy, opposition plays a vital role because it is the conscience of the government. The government is in power, and if the government is not questioned, and if there isn't a strong opposition, then the government can do almost everything that it pleases to do. And this is not a very good situation for the business environment. In a two-party system, very often what happens is one party just replaces the other, and then actually there is hardly any change. But in a multi-party system, when there are many parties which are forming a part of the opposition, then there are a variety of issues, and for each issue it may be that one of the parties stands up and opposes the government. Very often this would have a beneficial effect on the process of legislation, the process of control and administration. However, sometimes the opposition may act irresponsibly and completely stall the functioning of the government. This would also adversely affect the business environment. In India, there are many states in which there is a strong opposition, and unlike the earlier times in the 60s and 70s and so on, even during the 80s, now there are almost most of the states have coalition governments. So therefore, it is a more responsible form of governance, because at some time these parties may be collaborating with each other also. So therefore, the opposition cannot take an extreme step and get alienated completely. Now, let us talk about the political and legal institutions. Businesses operate in an environment and there are large number of political and legal institutions. Various socio-economic legislations are adopted which govern the business operations, and this sum total of these legislations is something which describes or governs the legal environment. In today's scenario, there are so many laws that it is very difficult to sum up everything in terms of what is going on in the political and legal environment. Basically, today's business is more a kind of a legal contract rather than a social contract. Ideally, a business should be an outcome of a social contract. The laws are needed for various other stakeholders in society to protect consumers, to protect the interests of workers, for managers, for owners, shareholders, and the society at large. We could point out certain existing laws like or institutions like the Insurance Development and Regulation Act, IDRA, and then you have FEMA, which is a new version of FERA, which was Foreign Exchange Regulation Act. So now it is Foreign Exchange Management Act. And then in place of earlier we had MRTP. Now in place of MRTP we have the Competition Commission and the competition laws. So there are various, and then there is the judiciary. There are courts. There is the Supreme Court, there is High Court and lower courts and so on. Now apart from this, there are some government departments with which businesses have to deal with. There is Bureau of Public Enterprises, Director General of Supplies and Disposal, Director General of Trade and Development. So there are many, and then there is Ministry of Corporate Affairs, where businesses should go and have to go for getting registered for establishing their own businesses. So now let us recapitulate what we have learned so far. The political environment includes political factors and government activities. It is a very unpredictable factor in the overall environment of the business. It includes government ideology, pressure groups, the bureaucracy and corruption. Every political party has its own ideology which directs the functioning of the government. These ideologies indirectly influence the functioning of the government. Sometimes these political parties are there as ruling parties and sometimes they are there as the opposition. Very often there are negative features of the business environment also. There are unnecessary rules, restrictions, regulations, formalities and red tape. All of this does not help the domestic business as well as the foreign businesses which would like to come and set up their business in our country. The corruption is something which is the misuse of power and authority for personal gains, and we have seen that corruption leads to inefficiency, wastages of funds and poor economic development. The political and legal institutions are a legal framework which are necessary in a guided democracy like India. We don't have a completely free market mechanism, therefore some legal and political institutions for control are necessary. There are various opposition parties, as we have said. Sometimes they are helpful, sometimes they hinder the environment in the economy.